My favorite jigs for throwing the turd, the TRD. This thing is one of the most popular baits on planet Earth. It popularized the technique, the Ned rig. Why? Because it's so buoyant, floats up, it gets a lot of action with basically no movement whatsoever. I'm barely even shaking this thing at all, and it's just shimmying and shaking around. So you can imagine the water column, it does look alive. And a lot of anglers say it's more of the bites come from its crazy fall on its way down. A lot of other anglers think it's its presentation on the bottom where it's standing straight up and down that gets you the bites. Now, when I think they're biting it more on the way down, I like the Z-Man jigs the most. They make them in super light sizes. This one here is a 1/10 of an ounce, but I've run them in the 1/15 and even the 1/20. If I think those fish are keying in on it at the end of a cast on its drop down and falling down through the water column. That's a great jig for that scenario. The hook's super light wire. You can almost catch them on slack line. You just start reeling and they're hooked up and they pin themselves to these things. But next up, you go to the Outcast Perfect Ned Heads. Our buddy Josh Douglas, a good friend of mine, designed this jig for Outcast. It's got the perfect length keeper on the shaft of the hook, so it holds that TRD on there super well. But this thing's got a bit of a meatier hook on it. So, and I think this one does really well at hitting the bottom and standing the jig up. It's curved on the edges, so it'll actually stand the bait up when it hits the bottom. It doesn't need to land straight like this to stand up. It can fall horizontal, even hit the bottom, and it'll roll its way back up to the standing position. So if I'm fishing them slow on the bottom, I prefer this one. I also prefer this jig if I'm using heavier tackle. If I'm using braid to a leader and I've got, like a 12-pound leader or 10-pound leader, which sounds pretty heavy for this technique, but sometimes I do it a lot, especially around heavy vegetation or around some rock or anything I don't want the fish to really run around. I like this jig a lot better. I can put some pressure on the fish. I even do run it in chartreuse sometimes. Sometimes, for whatever reason, I think the yoga pants color or the Canada craw color with a chartreuse head perfectly mimics a bluegill and pisses them off on those deep weed lines. So next time you're in the market for a jig for your Ned rigging, think light. I like to go with the Z-Man ones. If you're thinking a little bit heavier and power fishing the Ned rig, if that can be done, check out the Outcast Perfect Ned Heads.